Mr. Chair, we're now live.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Welcome to the General Government Committee meeting today, January 18th, 2021. Due to the COVID-19 emergency declaration, this meeting of the General Government Committee is being held electronically and live streamed on the town's website. All members of council and town staff in attendance are participating by audio and video teleconference. For members of the public watching from home, please bear with us if we encounter any technical difficulties throughout the meeting. So if we can scroll up, call this meeting to order. And is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? I don't see any hands. Thank you so much. I need a mover for the adoption of minutes. I see Lisa Bauer, Councillor Lisa Bauer. All in favor? That motion carries. Moving on to the consent agenda. 4.1, 4.2, and 4.3 have been pulled. On the balance of the consent agenda, can I have a mover?
Crawford.
Maryland, Regional Councillor Marilyn Crawford moves. All in favor? That carries. So now on to the consent agenda. First up, we have item number 4.1, which is the Ajax Pickering Hospital Foundation annual gift. And it was pulled by Mayor Collier. Actually, Councillor Bauer is first here. So we'll let Councillor Lisa Bauer speak to this on item 4.1.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for this report. It's always great that we support the hospital for sure, and the other charitable donations that council give. But I did have a question, a couple of them. It said in the report that the government of Ontario allocated funding to the hospital to increase the number of ICU beds from 11 to 13. So I'm just wondering, why are we being asked to purchase ICU beds if the government has allocated funds towards that?
Who can speak to this?
Hi, through the chair. It's Rachel Matheson.
Hi, Rachel.
And to answer your question, so the government of Ontario has, the province of Ontario has allocated funding to raise the number of ICU beds as indicated. But I actually am not aware of what the breakdown looks like, whether they're buying the new beds or just allocating the additional resources in terms of staffing and that kind of thing to support the new beds. So I can find out that answer for you, though.
Sure, yes, please. Thank you. And I guess we talked about this at the budget workshop last week, and I just wonder if $125,000 is an awful lot of money, given where we are today, where we it's COVID, it's global pandemic. We've laid people off. There's been hiring freezes, salary freezes, budget concerns. We've frozen user fees. So I just wonder if this might be something that we want to consider looking at differently this year. So I just wanted to make those comments because I did bring it up last week. Thank you.
Okay. Mayor Collier.
Thank you, Chair. Just to answer the question quickly for Councillor Bauer, I believe when they allocate, and I'll use the MRI for example, when we raised as a community $5 million for the MRI, that was the equipment, the capital, but the operating, the day-to-day, the allocation for the staff to run the MRI had to come from the province through something like this. So I believe they approved the labor piece, the operating piece, but the capital is separate, kind of like our budget as well. So the hospital has to raise the capital. And that's sort of like the mayor's charity classic golf tournament, where we use the money to buy equipment that is not included in the regular hospital budget. I would like to, if no other member of council has questions.
Are there any other questions from any other member of council at this time? Sorry, okay. Mayor Collier, you have the floor.
I didn't want to stifle debate by deferring this. I would move, Chair, that we defer this to the council meeting in February. And just to, I don't think I can speak to it, but just that comes after the budget process. And I think that might be a more appropriate place to have this after we've know for sure that we're allocating those funds.
So Mayor Collier is moving that. Regional Councillor Joanne Dyes, do you wish to speak to that?
I just have a question about deferring it to February, only because I'm wondering if there's an issue with timing, given that the COVID peak is just sort of hitting our hospitals. So, you know, how much of a delay would that be if we go ahead with the beds? I don't know if staff can answer that, but that's my concern.
Through the chair, I'm not sure what their procurement process looks like. It would take a little while to procure the beds, regardless of whether we or council decided to go ahead with it now or in February. So I think that the hospital would be grateful regardless if they were to receive a gift. So I wouldn't worry too much about that timing.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that said, and with what we know, Mayor Collier has motioned to defer this to February. All in favor of that motion?
To the February council meeting, Chair, and perhaps the clerk could just speak quickly as to if that's the most appropriate place for this to go.
Yes, Alec, if you could weigh in on this, please.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that would be the most appropriate meeting for this report to be referred to. Ratification on the budget would be scheduled for earlier in the February council meeting, so this report would come after that once the budget's confirmed.
So the motion would be deferred to the February 22nd council meeting. Town of Ajax.
Correct.
That's right. Yeah, that's the February council meeting. So anyways, with that said, and with Alec giving us that information, all in favor of deferment of this motion? Okay, that passes. Are there any other questions on 4.2? Or sorry, 4.1, I stand corrected. There being none, we can move on to 4.2, grants partnership update, and we have Regional Councillor Crawford who wishes to speak to this. And you're muted. You're muted, Marilyn.
Yeah, got it. Thank you. I'm going to call you Cass, because I don't know how to say your last name, so I don't want to insult you by trying. Thank you for this report. It's extremely detailed, and I do appreciate you, all the work that you've put into this over, I think you've not been here a year. Have you been here a year yet, Cass?
Through the chair, yes. I started July 29th. So
okay.
But a year and a few months.
Excellent. My question is, since March 20th, since the pandemic has hit, have there been many grants available outside of the startup funding that we received?
Through the chair, so there have been a few that have remained status quo. So the Celebrate Canada for our Canada Day grant has remained available. And then I would say kind of leading up to December, it was kind of an end of year push. There were a series of applications. So under the pending, the ones that we've applied for at the end of last year was the Audit and Accountability Fund, the second round there, the Inclusive Communities Fund, the Active School Travel Fund. Those were all sort of mid or throughout COVID. However, I will note that there was a substantial decrease in sort of the funding opportunities that are available from other levels of government. And I think that's just by virtue of governments tightening their belts, so to speak, in those during that time frame, and not creating new funds for applicants to apply for.
So lots of money flowing from the government, but not through a grant process.
Through the chair, that's correct. Other than the Safe Restart funds, there really hasn't been anything new or noteworthy.
Okay, so for the pending grants, I noticed that many of these. So the first one here under investment in Canada, so that's for a sports campus complex, multi-use dome. Like, if we get this money, I mean, do we have to, is there a time frame in which we have to use it by? Because obviously, like, these kinds of things are not going to be something that we can do in well, I mean, even if we get it in February, it's not going to be built for a few years, but are we, are we tied to what the project, what you asked for in this funding?
Through the chair, so there there would be a requirement to stick to the projects themselves. With there's always room for flexibility, but by and large, the expectation would be that we stick with whatever project we were approved for. However, the timeframe for the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, the Community Culture and Recreation Stream, construction for these projects do not need to be completed until 2027, 2028 for us to be fully within our requirements under the contribution agreement.
Okay, that's good to know. So we just tuck it away in a savings account and then, or else build as we can, right?
So through the chair, yes. So we put, when we applied for the grant, there were some estimates put forth around the construction timeline. But those, once approved, the government does request updated projections and estimates for, what fiscal years we expect to use and spend most of the money. And so we can revise that on an as needed basis once we are approved.
Okay, and when you talk about funding was oversubscribed, I'm assuming that means that too many people made a request for funding and then they ran out of money?
Through the chair, that's correct. It was, there were more applicants and a larger ask than the government had applied a certain amount of funding for.
Oh, sorry. And okay, so back to the pending. Sorry, I missed a question on this. If we don't receive funding, then the project just disappears, right? We're not looking to fund a multi-use dome if we don't get a grant funding. Is that correct?
Through the chair at this point, that would be correct. However, it would just be a project like that in the event we did not receive grant funding. If staff were to bring that forward, it would go through the traditional budget process at a later date. There wouldn't be a requirement that we go through with it without any grant funding.
Okay, perfect. You mentioned in your report about looking at smart city opportunities. What have you been looking at in that?
So through the chair, at a very early place, we've had some conversations with Bell Canada as an example, who have brought forward a series of proposals to staff to recommend ways in which some smart cities technologies could be applied in the town. However, in reviewing a lot of them with staff, a lot of what is being requested by some of these organizations that come to municipalities with a request for smart cities. A lot of the work is already being done by municipalities, but maybe not talked about or framed as a smart initiative. So while we continue to engage, and there are some pilot projects that staff are reviewing right now related to litter receptacles. We had a presentation provided to us on soil moisture levels. Staff continue to look at these opportunities that are presented to us for pilot projects, but also internally through these conversations that at least myself and others have had with staff internally. There are a lot of innovative technology heavy things that happen in different departments that maybe we don't talk about or really highlight as even though they are really smart initiatives and they are technology heavy, we don't really talk about them in that way. And council may not be aware of these kind of very neat things that happen in the individual business units. So on one hand, while we continue to, look at the pilot opportunities and engage in these conversations where it's possible, continuing to look internally about what we already do and what we have planned as staff that kind of fit that definition of what a smart city is an ongoing process that we're starting to look at quite seriously.
Okay, thank you. I like I said, I do appreciate all the work that you've done for this, and I'm hoping that and I don't know if you can even speak to this, it's very early in 2021, but are you noticing that grants are starting to open up a little bit more now?
Through the chair, right now, the focus is on the summer job grants. We're seeing that. I haven't seen any sort of new grants that come out, but those will, we usually get a sense of when that happens as the federal and provincial governments go through their traditional budget process. if there's any new opportunities. However, I will say we haven't noticed a closing or a discontinuation of the sort of annual grants that we know kind of come up on a regular basis. There hasn't been, okay, we're going to pull that back or that fund doesn't exist anymore. I haven't really noticed that in sort of my travels of researching these opportunities. But what will be really telling is the federal budget and the provincial budget and any new programs that are highlighted in that process.
Great. Well, I know you will let us know if these pending grants do come through. I know you're good at that. You're an excellent communicator. So I look forward to that and hope that that happens in the very, very near future. Thank you very much again for this report.
Okay, next up we have.
If there's no other questions.
Okay, duly noted, Regional Councillor Crawford. Next question is Mayor Collier.
Well, thank you, Chair. Not so much a question. I just want to point out to Council, if you look on page 6, under support for community organizations, we've been approached by a number of different groups, like the Legion, for instance, and Para, that are listed there. And we were basically loaned Cassandra out to these organizations to help them with their grant writing applications, and they have been quite successful. So I just wanted to point that out to Council that, you know, we can't, I know we have struggling businesses and we have other things, and we can't necessarily help them out financially in most cases, but there are other things that we can do to help members of the community and different organizations, and this is just one of them. So just wanted to mention that, and thank you, Cassandra. Great job. Thank you, Chair.
Good information. Good information. Next speaker we have Lisa Bauer. Sorry, Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, great report, Cass. Thank you very much. Lots of excellent information and good news stories for sure. Just questioning also on page 6, so the development of a naming rights policy, an update of corporate sponsorship policy. And I know we were all super duper excited about this at the beginning of term with the Tostitos rec center or whatever it was. Thanks, Regional Councillor Lee. And forgive me if you have already updated us on this in previous meetings and I have forgotten. But where are we on all of that? And you know, I know we're in a weird time, but has there been any movement or any kind of update on that you could share with us?
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Bauer. So the policy was completed, as you mentioned, not long ago, and the corporate sponsorship policy was amended just to reflect kind of staff's shift towards, you know, while taking advantage of our existing sponsorship opportunities that present sort of annually, but looking for these kind of newer, larger scale opportunities. At this time, COVID was a really big provided a pretty substantial setback to these proactive conversations related to seeking out sponsors for naming rights. However, in recognition of that, staff have it on a priority list to begin really at least developing some semblance of a tangible action plan over the course of 2021-2022 to see if we can get some tangible wins that can be shared with council sometime in that time frame.
Great, thank you so much for that. That's it for me, Chair.
Okay, next speaker is Regional Councillor Dias.
Thank you. To Ms. Cruciano, I'm just curious about applying, say we've got something on the table, you're applying for the grant, it's unsuccessful. Do you keep applying until you're successful, or is it sort of off the table?
Through the chair, so it depends on what the project is. As a general rule in staff's approach to these things, if in the event that there is an unsuccessful application, staff requests a debrief from the funder to better understand the rationale for decline. So in the event that it's if it's an oversubscribed case where there was just more applicants than funding, then that would be a case where staff would go back and apply in the next round, whether it be for the same project or for a new project that has taken priority in those cases. However, in other cases where something like So that would apply in cases, and noted in the chart here, that like the capital improvement plan for the Rotary Park Boardwalk, that was an example where we went back to the funder and we said, okay, can you explain to us why this may or may not have been successful? And they had said, this based on how many people we had, we would suggest applying again. And these are a few small things you can tweak in your application, or reasons why we maybe didn't think it would, hit that mark. So based on that feedback, staff, do assess to the value of reapplying. But in other cases where it's like, this project really isn't a great fit, the funder will often ask us, do you have another project that maybe falls under this bucket? Because this is a big priority for us, and we really didn't get a lot of applications in this particular area. So developing a good relationship with the funder after the fact has been a really important exercise and kind of an ongoing process to make sure that we are, even when we are unsuccessful, that we do take the feedback and determine if we reapply or how we do so.
Thank you for that. I also would like to know whether, COVID's a very good example of how things can change very rapidly from one budget year to another. So I guess my concern is also that if you have something that has gone forward, it has been declined, you're considering again, like if there's a large gap in time, does it not need to come back to GGC for discussion? Just so we can really figure out whether that's still, something we want to go forward with. It's really an important one.
Through the chair, absolutely. And I think what we normally would do is, if it's a project that has been identified previously by council as a priority, it is something that is in the capital budget, then that is normally kind of our first level of priority. But certainly the feedback is taken that in cases where there may be a substantial priority shift, or staff anticipate that council may have some strong opinions or feedback on the particular project, where possible, that's absolutely a point taken, that staff can bring some of those larger scale projects back when they maybe fall, into a different order on the priority list.
Well, I think right now, we're reviewing the cost of capital budgets, and some are quite large, some of these. So I think some of those that have that high, budget impact need to be reviewed. My other question is specific to the Annie Crescent Bridge. Did we not receive funding for that already through a grant?
So through the chair, that was a grant that was submitted. However, from the point in time that the application was submitted to the time when the Great Trail was willing to fund the project, there had been such a substantial change in scope based on the deterioration of the bridge, that what we had initially requested in terms of funding was no longer sufficient. And so therefore the project was not able to move forward under that grant. So based on, so in that case, what we've done is, through conversations with the funder, with the TRCA, and pending, what direction council provided, we will be going back to resubmit an application for that project in the spring, with the updated information about the scope of the project.
So you have not received any funding from the Great Trail?
Through the chair, to date, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Regional Councillor Dyes. Any other questions on this motion? Regional Councillor Lee, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ms. Cruciano, for your report. I want to draw your attention to the Safe Restart funding, additional operating funding for 2020. This is the unsuccessful grant applications of $710,000. Can you walk me through why the government of Ontario would not give us $710,000?
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Lee, for this question. So this version of the Safe Restart funding. So in 2020, the province of Ontario provided $1.34 million to offset our operating budget shortfall. That was based on a number of factors, including our median household income, the value of our infrastructure, and a number of other factors. Based on that, the government then went back and said, listen, everybody got this amount off the top. However, if you have additional shortfalls in your budget, please fill out this application form and resubmit it. when we went back to resubmit this, and I will ask the Director of Finance to tag team in the event that I do misrepresent this or make a mistake here. But what we submitted for was an ultimate shortfall of $710,000. That included our operating budget, the way that we framed it and presented it to the government, included transfers to our reserves. And our transfers to our reserves, as you know, are largely funded through items like the casino revenues and other sort of non-tax revenues that are received. Based on that, the government made the decision or communicated to staff that because the casino revenues were being, even though they flowed through the operating budget, the intent of them largely was to fund our capital program. And as a result of that, they indicated that it was not an eligible expense under their program guidelines.
Walk me through this though. I could swear the money came from the federal government to the provinces throughout Canada to distribute, correct?
Through the chair, that is correct. This was a federal provincial agreement where funds were flowed from the federal government, and the province collectively between them and the federal government determined the guidelines of how they flowed those funds.
Was there a federal requirement saying municipalities with casinos are not eligible because of casinos?
Through the chair, not to my knowledge.
So I guess my point here ultimately is 710,000 is not an inconsequential number. It's about almost a full % on the Ajax tax base that this province is not allocating because, according to consent item 4.3, we have good financial practices, and I find that very hard to accept, considering there's a CBC article saying they're sitting on as much as $12 billion. So I just want to point out that whatever happens come budget time, and I know the mayor, council, staff are working tirelessly to get this to a reasonable number. We're already working against a $710,000 deficit because the government has arbitrarily, from what I'm being told, decided that municipalities with casinos aren't eligible because of the way we've properly allocated our finances. Like I find that very hard to accept, and it was very disappointing to see this under the unsuccessful grant applications column as opposed to the successful grant applications column. Ms. Cruciano, it's no fault of yours. I just think it's worth pointing out that, it seems that the province is sitting on a lot of money. It seems as if Ajax is left holding out our hands as per usual, and it seems that it's going to fall into the tax base to make up a decision made by our provincial government. So I just want to point that out. So thank you very much, Cruciano. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Regional Councillor Lee. Just quickly, does anybody else have any other questions? I believe Mayor Collier wants to speak to maybe what Regional Councillor Lee just spoke about. So we'll go to Mayor Collier next, and then to my friend Councillor Ashmit Khan. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair. And I share Councillor Lee's and probably everybody else's frustration in this. I find it very difficult to believe that slots revenues are not, or loss of slots revenues are not COVID related. So in fact, I did reach out to MP Holland to ask whether there were any restrictions on that federal money. The response I received, I believe there were none. And I did write a letter to Minister Steve Clark, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, on December the 17th, again, requesting that this be reconsidered. And not just us, but I also spoke with Mayor Mitch Panchuk from Belleville and some others. Milton is another one. All the casino host municipalities are in similar problems because we all, and Councillor, you're absolutely right. I think the responsible thing to do is to include that in capital, so that way it doesn't affect our budget. And if the next item 4.3 regarding the financial sustainability plan speaks to that quite a bit, and how that's the responsible, proper way to do it. Unfortunately, I can't explain why the province decided to keep that money, but we did try very, very hard. But there was funding left over from that federal allocation, I understand. And the province is, I'm not sure what happened with that money, but literally a couple of days after we were notified that we would not receive the phase 2 funding, the province came out with a whole new funding stream that they gave to everybody for 2021. I did explain to our MPP that that's not going to help our 2020 deficit, but again, it was been a very frustrating process, because to me, I think it's just a no-brainer that slots revenue loss is due to closure of the casinos due to COVID. But unfortunately, the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing did not agree.
Thank you, Mayor Collier. If that's your finish. Next up, we have Councillor Ashmit Khan.
Thank you, Chair Tyler Moran. Thank you, Ms. Cruciano. Just your attention to page 5, please, with the Enabling Accessibility Fund. I noticed we've been denied just $10,000 for the purchase of an adjustable podium and replacement of assistant listening devices for council chambers. And this is very important for our residents, but it says the fund was oversubscribed. Can you emphasize what that means exactly, please?
Through the chair, thank you very much for the question. So that means that they received a number of applications that exceeded the budget that they had to spend for that particular program. And so unfortunately, that was not a selected project. Now, I would ask Director Cooper to jump in the event that I'm misrepresenting this, but I do believe that the items that are noted that grant was applied for, including the furniture and some upgrades for technology in council chambers, would be captured in the council chambers AV upgrade, an interior upgrade that staff are seeking another grant for through the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program COVID Resiliency Fund, which is noted on page 4.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much. That's well appreciated. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Ashmit Khan. Any other questions on this motion? There being none, I just want to add, Ms. Cruciano, thank you so much for everything you do, and this is highly relevant. I know you have other people that you work with, everybody from finance. Alternate forms of revenue streams are always welcomed. Boy, oh boy, an understatement. Okay, so on 4.2, grants and partnerships update, we have Regional Councillor Marilyn Crawford moving. All in favor? Okay, that motion passes. Thank you so much. We are now on to item number 4.3, Financial Sustainability Plan Update Recommendation. And we have Mayor Collier, I believe, is our only speaker at this point. You have the floor, sir. And you are muted.
You know, I said I wasn't going to do that today.
You and I both, sir. Yeah. You and I both.
Just let me find the page here. So this was, I referred this back and I was trying to figure out why we referred it back. But one of the pieces that I saw in here were the Alexicon revenues. And after the December 14th GDC meeting, where this report first came, it talked about not receiving those. And since then, on December 17th, the board did approve those. So I wonder, Ms. Valentin, if you could just tell us, how does that affect this report going forward with that change, please?
Thank you, Mayor, through the chair. It doesn't really affect this report. This is the recommendations that are coming forward under this report are administrative changes to the policies that fit under the financial sustainability plan. At that point in time when we were writing this report, those were the stats that we had and the information that we had. So we had moved forward with allocating the funds to the reserves. And we did receive $1.5 million in December, which we were able to transfer over to the reserves.
Okay, and that went into capital. So it's just the numbers on here showing our capital balances would have been affected by that money, I assume.
Correct.
Okay, so minor adjustments doesn't get us back to where we need to be, but certainly better than this was portrayed originally.
Yes.
Just looking at the debt on page 10. Can you tell me how much of this is internal, please?
That was in my FSP report, or sorry, my budget education. So let me just see if I can pull that up. Internal debt. Sorry. I believe the internal debts. Sorry, I'm going to defer to Ms. Munns if she has that information handy.
Hang on, I'm just pulling that out. I didn't pull it in my report for me. I believe it's the two debts, the town hall and the fire hall, but I think they're about. Hang on, sorry, I'll just have to pull that up.
Well, I don't need the exact number. Is it a large amount of it, a small amount of it, of the 17 million? Just trying to get an understanding.
The new debt that we issued for ARC were external debt. The rest are a combination of internal and external. Sorry, I'm just trying
Okay,
to
so
do
probably about 60% of that or so would be, I'm thinking just from memory, external.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that would be accurate. I just I don't want to quote a bad number.
Okay, that's fine. I'm just wondering, of the external debt, the Only Rec Center is fairly new, but if we have any long-term debt, does it ever make sense to look at refinancing any of that, given the historical low rates that are available today? Or once we issue a debenture, are we locked in for the entire time? Is it like a mortgage?
Through the chair, I believe we're locked in, but that is obvious. That is something that I can research with the region if we have that opportunity.
Okay. I'm not going to get into so much the rate of return. I just wanted to mention to you, I think you're probably aware, but we have a motion coming at the next council meeting to look at to ask for a report to look at different ways to get our reserves maybe working better for us. In a report, it speaks to a couple of areas about mitigating the impact of inflation. But I feel we also need to be mitigating the impact of inflation on our balances as well. Would you agree with that?
Through the chair, definitely, yes.
Okay. Well, that will be coming forward shortly. And I think that can help but assist in this process. I think this budget we're going to have, I do approve of the changes in here, and I will move the report, Chair, if nobody else has already. But I think this this time around, we're going to have probably one of the most difficult budgets I've had a part of anyway, given COVID and our challenges we're having. But thank you, Diane, to you and your staff. You're doing a great job. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Collier. Are there any other questions? There being none, we have Mayor Collier moving financial sustainability plan update recommendation. All in favor? That carries. Thank you so much. 4.4 already has been moved, and we're on to number 5, which is discussion. 5.1, automated speed enforcement update from Director Romanowski and your team, sir. Mr. Grieve, you have the floor.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'll have John give us a brief update on ASE. Since we last updated council, I believe it was back in, I would say around November of 2020. John, if you're on the line, if you could take council through a brief update, and then we'll open it up for any questions.
Yes, I am. I'd be happy to. So yes, as Jeff said, we wanted to come to council this afternoon to give you all a very quick update on our progress. So last time we did speak was actually September, at September GGC, where we outlined the program and council approved direction for staff to proceed with implementation in 2021. So since September, staff have completed signing all of our new community safety zones. So the 10 new safety zones that were identified, have been signed. We are bringing forward a bylaw amendment to January council, which will see them added to the schedule within the traffic bylaw. We are in the process of finalizing procurement of the permanent radar message boards that we will deploy in all 12 of our community safety zones. This provides us a permanent ability to do data analysis in those zones, be able to compare conditions, with and without the automated speed enforcement cameras deployed, see their impact, see trends over time on the traffic patterns. So that procurement should take place over the coming weeks, and then those signs will be deployed to the zones. Since September, staff have had a number of meetings and discussions with Durham Region, understanding their program and some of the lessons learned they've seen in the first 6 months of their program. We've also had discussions with them about the courts and the processes related to automated speed enforcement and courts. I've had some discussions, or staff have had discussions with the City of Toronto, who are the operators of the Joint Processing Center, understanding what is required related to those agreements and steps needed for us to activate or implement our program. And then we've had discussions with the equipment provider, Redflex, who are they provide the automated speed enforcement camera, speaking with them about what are the specific site requirements for where our camera is deployed, going over the various elements of the agreement that would be signed with them, and advancing those discussions. So we've had very productive discussions with those three groups, learned a lot. As you heard in our operating budget and capital budget workshop last week, these discussions have led us to refine our financial estimates for the program. I won't go into those today, but you heard that last week. And staff are continuing to basically finalize the elements of our program and work toward making sure we are ready to implement this year, and we'll look to execute the three agreements that are required once we receive budget approval in February. So very quick update, and happy to answer any questions that council has.
Thank you, Mr. Grieve. We first have Mayor Collier.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Mr. Grieve, and thank you for that update. John, have you seen the Toronto Star article from Friday, January 15th regarding the photo radar cameras in Toronto?
I did.
Through the chair to Mayor Collier, I believe so. Is that regarding the number of tickets that they had issued in the first months of their program?
Yeah, 53,000 tickets over the first couple of months. They have 50 cameras. But after they had been operating for a few months, that number dropped down to just over 5,000. So that to me is a 90% reduction in speeding. Is that in your experience, the results that should probably be felt everywhere where there's the automatic speed enforcement?
Through the chair to Mayor Collier, I think that is probably a top end number. If you remember, region staff presented to council in December this year. They gave an update on the impacts they saw along Bailey in the town of Ajax. They saw a 30% reduction in speeding. So that's a local example. I recognize on a regional road, which has a slightly different travel pattern or vehicle characteristic on it. But absolutely, this program is intended to reduce speeding, and therefore the number of tickets implemented or issued should drop over the life of the program. So that is absolutely a desired result or an expected result.
Well, I can tell you, I'd be happy with 30% on our street. And I think most of our councils are pretty happy with 30% if that's the bare minimum. So I'm actually looking forward to this. Just a question, I don't want to get into all the numbers, but a few days ago, a resident sent me a red light camera ticket that they've received, and they weren't very happy, but oh well. And I was looking at it, and the ticket itself was, I think, $240 or $260, but the set fine amount was $325. So they add in the court costs and the processing fee on top of the ticket. When we've looked at the costs for the automatic speed enforcement, it appeared to me that all those court costs and processing fees were taken from the fine, which brought it down to near zero or potentially a loss. I wonder, can we not add these court costs and fees, processing fees, to the fine amount for automatic speed enforcement as is done in the red light cameras?
So through the chair to Mayor Collier, those fines, it's a victim surcharge fine and a processing fee. Those two will exist on automated speed enforcement tickets. That is one. Then the cost that the municipality who is operating the program bears, that is one of the major lessons learned or pieces of information we have learned since September is refining those numbers and bringing actually those numbers down from our initial estimates in September. Therefore, kind of lowering the overall cost of the program to much lower or much a smaller scale, I guess. We do still, as we presented on last Monday, we do still anticipate this program will operate as a loss. And as we stated then, that's kind of been our expectation. This isn't a money-making program. This is a road safety program. So
right. And absolutely, I'm not talking about trying to make it generate revenue. I'm just trying to figure out the difference there, and it seemed to me a rather large amount. I think that was about $85 difference added on top, which was about 30% or so on top of the original ticket amount, maybe 35%. Is there any flexibility as to building in the costs into the tickets for automatic speed enforcement, or is that all absolutely mandated by the province and we have to follow its, specific requirements?
It is a mandated process because those are provincial offenses tickets. They are, it's a regulated process. And as I said, there are those fines similar to red light camera that are included in ASE. However, what is different for automated speed enforcement red light camera is the fine. An automated speed, as you said, you saw on the ticket, is a set cost or a set fine. Whereas, red light is the set fine. Automated speed is based on the speed of the vehicle and those thresholds that are outlined within the regulation.
But the court cost and the processing fees would be fixed, but the fine would be variable depending on how much the speed is exceeded.
That is correct.
Okay. So when you were doing those cost analysis, how did you decide what fine amount to use?
Sorry, those costs, the cost to the town was based on our discussion, our understanding of the program. And it's those costs, as I noted, since September, we've understood that our preliminary estimates were significantly too high. And that is where those have been reduced. They're still a best guess given that operating an automated speed enforcement program for any municipality is still very new. Durham Region only turned their cameras on in September of last year. And so everyone who's operating a program is still very much in the learning phase. So town staff have done our best to refine and revise our estimates wherever appropriate, given that the new information we've learned since September.
Okay, and just I understand the region is newer. Toronto's been operating this for longer. Will they be sharing any of their data with other municipalities since they have been operating for, I guess, nearly a year at this point?
Yeah, so all participating municipalities are part of a working group, which the town of Ajax also does participate on. And so lessons learned and there is a level of data sharing is done amongst that group. And that is where our town staff have also been able to glean some of this new information and some of these lessons learned from those municipalities who are operating, and that is reflected in our new approach and the elements of our implementation.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair Tyler Moore as well.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Grieve. Oh, actually, sorry, Regional Councillor Sterling Lee, do you have a question? Your hand was not up. Regional Councillor Marilyn Crawford, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, John, for your update. I just wanted you to tell us if I got dinged with a, let's say, I don't know, 5 kilometers over whatever the limit is, that ticket, how is it split up? Because we don't keep all of it, correct?
So sorry, through the chair to Regional Councillor Crawford. That is one element we are still working at gaining a full understanding with the region as they operate the courts. But yes, the fine revenue or the fine that a person receives is based on obviously the speed they are observed at or clocked at. Given that all of our cameras will operate in community safety zones, that fine is doubled. That is set out in the Highway Traffic Act. But then when it comes to seeing what revenue we would receive, there are court costs that need to be removed. And then any remaining revenue would be subject to the revenue sharing agreements that exist between the region and local area municipalities related to provincial offenses, which is a 60.
I also think, do we not have to give a certain portion of those to the Toronto Processing Center?
The fee that we pay the Toronto Processing Center is strictly based on number of tickets that they process for us. It is a per ticket basis. So in the example that I gave in September, we anticipated our program would issue 15,000 tickets. So the cost we would pay to the City of Toronto for joint processing would be a 15,000 times the cost per ticket, or the per ticket fee that they apply.
There's a lot of hidden costs in all of this also. I mean, it is effective, no doubt. The Vision Zero, we've talked about it, that they've never seen a 30% reduction in speed in any other form of road calming that they have tried to do. So it is definitely effective, and it is definitely not a moneymaker. But thank you for your update.
Okay, thank you, Regional Councillor Marilyn Crawford. Any other questions from any member of council? If not, thank you so much, gentlemen, for your report. Can we get a motion to receive for information? Mayor Collier, okay, all in favor? Okay, thank you so much. Moving on to number 6, presentations. We have none. So we're going into a closed session. Can I get a mover? Councillor Lisa Bauer to go into the closed session. All in favor? That motion passes.
Mr. Chair, we are live again.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk, I need a motion to ratify the actions taken in the closed session. Councillor Khan. Very good. And all in favor? Okay, that passes. And now I need a motion to adjourn. Councillor Bauer, all in favor? Thank you, colleagues, councillors, staff.